You didn't know about Nicole Vandenherk and how a false confession brought justice to her murder. Nicole was only 15. She lived in Eindhoven, Netherlands. On October 6, 1995, she left early one morning on her bike to head into work, but she never arrived. Later that evening, her bike was found laying alongside a river, and it wasn't until the 19th that they had found another trace of her. Her backpack was found near a canal. It wasn't until 7 weeks later, on November 22nd, somebody stumbled on her body out in the woods, just miles away from her home. Examination showed she had been assaulted and then brutally stabbed to death. She had 2 fractures to her jaw, injuries to her head and fingers, and the fatal stab wound was in her ribcage. Initially, the police did have suspects, but they had no strong leads to make actual arrests. In 2005, Nicole's murder became a cold case. But her stepbrother, Andy Vandenherk, decided to take matters into his own hands. In 2011, he confessed to the murder of his stepsister, despite the fact that he didn't do it. His reasoning being, so they would exhume her grave and run the evidence on her body, since DNA testing had come so far since the original case took place. He was kept in custody for 5 days because they didn't have any proof that he committed this crime besides this confession. That's when he told them he confessed falsely simply to get justice. And it worked. Once in the system, the DNA hit an immediate match. Jos DG. He was immediately arrested. Turns out he already spent time in preventative detention for the assaults of 3 different women. But because Andy was willing to take this huge gamble with his own life, they were able to put away the man who murdered his stepsister. I bet you didn't know about Khmer Rouge. It was the name given to the Communist Party of Kampuchea. They ruled Cambodia from 1975 to 1979. They were known to commit horrific acts of torture. There was one survivor who came forward and spoke of the horrific things that they saw. His name's Kiao Chan Dara. This is one of the horrific things that he saw. Now, fair warning, this is pretty graphic. He said Khmer Rouge brought 3 women out in front of 12 prisoners. They were stripped of their clothes. They were forced to sit on the ground and were mutilated with pliers, tearing up their noses, ears, cheeks, and lips as the women screamed out in pain. That isn't even the worst part. They then poured acid into these open wounds. They did this until the women fainted. Once they did, they doused them with water to wake them back up. One woman was unable to answer questions because of the severity of the torture. So they hoisted her up and hung her on a hook from the ceiling, penetrating through her throat and having the hook come out of her mouth. Then one of the soldiers approached the woman and cut out her heart, her liver, and her gallbladder. One of the soldiers joked and asked if the liver could be fried up for him, and also if the gallbladder could be kept for him. Kiao Chan Dara also explained how as a prisoner he was forced to bury bodies in mass graves. He said up to 50 people were killed a day at the prison. Also, thank you everyone who has sent tips so far. I've been taking tips to do content of your choice on my TikTok. You can find my Venmo and my Cash App in the bio on my TikTok page. Include your username in the note, and I'll give you a follow and send you a message. And you can request a specific subject or story you want featured on my TikTok. Just make sure it fits the niche of my whole page. And everyone who has already tipped me, thank you so much. I bet you didn't know about Mary Ellen Spook Farm. This was a requested story from Stephen L. 6487. They sent me a tip and requested what they wanted the video to be about. January of 1922. Farmer Alexander McDonald and his wife Janet and their adopted daughter Mary Ellen fled their home. It was in Caledonia Mills, Nova Scotia. Their reasoning? Extreme poltergeist activity, including 30 unexplainably started fires. The poltergeist was nicknamed the Fire Spook. Tons of investigators tried to figure out what caused this, and to this day it's still unexplained. The poltergeist activity plagued the family for a whole year while living in this home. Moving cattle around in their stalls when no one else was present, obscure ash being found mixed in with the cow's milk, and even the horses' tails were unexplainably braided. But the fires is where things got scary. They would start out of nowhere, and they'd always start in places where there was no possible way of a spark happening. From random wallpaper to wet piles of towels. The family even organized a neighborhood watch to try and catch an arsonist. But none was ever found, but the fires kept being started. Once the family fled, a bunch of paranormal investigators had to go see for themselves. Two of the investigators experienced some pretty odd events. They said they were slapped in their face and arms by phantom hands, and they came to the conclusion that this poltergeist was somehow connected to Mary Ellen, the adopted child. Unfortunately, that assumption stuck with Mary Ellen through the rest of her life, and people began to call her Mary Ellen Spook. Some accounts say that she was actually confined to asylum for many years because of this. They were unable to figure out the exact source of what caused these fires and strange phenomenons. They say if you remove anything from the property, even a piece of rubble from the fallen down house, wherever you take it will also catch on fire. If you'd like to show your support too, you can head over to my YouTube, which is Jamie13Horror, and watch my videos. Or I put my Venmo and my Cash App in my bio here on TikTok. Or you can tip me directly through TikTok if that's an option. Just make sure and include your username in the note. I'll follow you back and send you a message. That way I can feature the subject or story you want to see on my TikTok. Just make sure it follows the niche of the rest of my page. True crime, horror, everything like that. Pretty much anything scary. Then I'll make a video featuring the subject and I'll tag you in it. And those of you who have already done so, thank you so much. I love you for it. I bet you didn't know what actually causes you to see demons during sleep paralysis. This idea came from Freedom Smith 13. They sent me a tip and I asked them what they would like me to do a TikTok on. Sleep paralysis is a very strange phenomenon. You wake up in the middle of the night. You're unable to move. You suddenly panic and become very anxious. You feel the presence of something else in the room with you. Sometimes you'll see a large figure hovering in the corner of your room, or even hovering over you in bed. Believe it or not, 10% of the population experiences this. And you're completely stuck there, unable to move. Either you fall back asleep, or you slowly start to regain your movement. But it's always absolutely terrifying. This happens when there's a malfunction with your REM sleep, which REM stands for rapid eye movement. It's the point in your sleep cycle where your brain is the most active. That's also usually when your brain dreams. So the dreams you remember usually happen during REM sleep. Your dreams and reality blend in together. You can't tell the difference. But what you're seeing isn't a dream. It's actually a full-blown hallucination. Your mind is playing wicked tricks on you. They say it's a lapse in your consciousness. But they can't figure out exactly why we all see this giant dark figure. The reports from everyone is always the same. Either a tall, looming dark figure or a dark figure crushing your chest. They don't know why that's what we see, but it seems to be with everyone. So what do you think? Is it actually sleep paralysis? Or there's a demonic presence that's only around when we're sleeping? If you'd like to support my content, you can head over to my YouTube, which is Jamie13Horror, and subscribe and watch my videos there. Or my Venmo and my Cash App is in my bio here on TikTok. Or you can use the tip option if it's available. You can send me some kind of tip. Just make sure to include your username in the note if you're not using TikTok. And I'll follow you back and send you a message. I'll cover the subject or story of your choice, as long as it fits the horror niche of my whole page. Then I'll make the TikTok and tag you in it. I bet you didn't know about John Bunting, the ringleader of the Snowtown murders. This video suggestion came from Grim Knife Co. They sent me a tip and then a suggestion on what they wanted me to do a video about. I'll explain how you can do that at the end of the video. John Bunting is known as Australia's most brutal serial killer. Bunting killed 11 people. He didn't do it alone though. Some people tried to dub him a vigilante killer, but definitely some of those people did not deserve it. His motivation for murder was a deep hatred for homosexuals, pedophiles, and anyone he considered weak. He had help from Robert Wagner, Jamie Vlasakis, and Mark Hayden. John was actually Jamie's stepfather. He took over the fatherly role in his life. Robert and Mark were neighbors that he befriended. It started when they invited a 22-year-old that was suspected to be a pedophile over to John's home. They beat him to death with a shovel. Another victim was a mentally handicapped 26-year-old. There was rumors he had tried to become sexual with underage boys. They also murdered a 19-year-old openly gay man simply for the fact that he was gay. Robert had been in a long-term relationship with a transgender woman. She had assisted in the help of the murder of the pedophile, but they decided to turn on her and murdered her as well. They also murdered her 18-year-old lover. Then there was a 31-year-old drug addict who was friends with Jamie. John accidentally pricked himself with one of his dirty needles and became angry. So in response, he murdered him. They also murdered Jamie's stepbrother. Jamie had claimed that he had assaulted him when he was young, and that was the reason for the murder. The other victims were people who were mentally disabled or those they just considered weak. They took the bodies of their victims and stashed them in barrels. The ones that weren't stored in barrels were in an underground vault. John was convicted of all 11 murders. He's serving 11 consecutive life sentences. Robert was convicted of 10 and is serving 10 consecutive life sentences. Jamie admitted to 4 of the murders and is serving 4 consecutive life sentences, without a possibility of parole until 26 years have been served. Mark was sentenced to 25 years, without the possibility of parole until 18 years were served. If you'd like to support me, you can head over to my YouTube and subscribe and watch my videos. It's Jamie13Horror, just like it is here on TikTok. Or if you'd like me to feature a specific subject or story on my TikTok, head over to my TikTok and you can leave a tip, or use my Venmo or Cash App that's linked in my bio, and make sure to include your username in the note. I'll follow you back and send you a message. You can tell me what you'd like me to do a TikTok on. Just make sure it's on brand with the rest of my content. Keep it creepy and scary. I bet you didn't know that scientists discovered that there's a slime mold that is showing cellular intelligence, despite the fact that it doesn't have a brain. Fusarium polycephalum. It's a type of slime mold. It can solve mazes, mimic the layout of man-made transportation routes, and choose the healthiest sort of nutrients out of a diverse menu. But it doesn't have a brain or a nervous system. This is literally me right now freaking out about this. The way that this slime moves is very similar to muscular movements on a molecular level. In Japan, they chopped up the slime and they placed it strategically around a maze. It was able to find and reconnect with itself. But it gets so much cooler. In laboratories, this slime mold has effectively recreated Tokyo's railway system, as well as recreate the highways in Canada, the UK, and Spain. How they would do this is they would take oats and place them in what would be major cities. And this slime mold somehow recreated the railway, highway, all those kinds of systems, connecting the cities to each other. Sometimes they would be more efficient than the actual way we've done it. They said this slime mold behaves like an effective crew of engineers. Just like human engineers build efficient networks, they are able to recreate the shortest, most logical paths. This slime mold also knows how to adapt itself to different temperatures so that it's able to survive. They did controlled experiments with dropping the temperature, watching the mold slow down to reserve its strength, but as they raised the temperature, the mold still stayed slow growing, in anticipation that it would get cold again. This is the craziest thing I've ever. This slime mold has been evolving for 600 million years. They know how to remember, anticipate, and make decisions, but it has no brain or nervous system. Scientists are still very closely studying this mold, and they're trying to figure out how exactly it has cellular intelligence. I bet I bet you didn't know there was an update with the Lacey Fletcher case. I'm going to give a short recap for those of you who hadn't seen the previous TikTok I did on this. Earlier this year in Slaughter, Louisiana, a 36-year-old woman was found at her parents' home. It was estimated she had not left the couch in about 5 years. She was absolutely covered in feces and bed sores. They were still trying to determine her cause of death. But she only weighed 96 pounds when her body was found. They said the neglect was so severe she had literally melted to the couch she was sitting on. The community vouched for her parents, saying they were good church-going people and that they loved their daughter very much. But here's the new update. Turns out Lacey had locked-in syndrome. It's a syndrome where you're completely paralyzed besides the movement of your eyes. It was estimated that she had not moved from that spot in 12 years. It's where she slept, she ate, and also used the bathroom. Lacey had not received medical attention in 20 years. Her parents, Clay and Sheila Fletcher, spoke to a doctor in 2010 about Lacey's condition. They didn't bring Lacey with them. The doctor told them they immediately needed to make an appointment for her and bring her in. They never did. Instead, for 12 years, they let her sit in the same spot on that couch, developing deep bed sores, urinating and defecating on herself. And there was nothing she could do. When they were asked about Lacey, they said she was doing just fine. When Lacey completely stopped eating, her parents still didn't get her medical attention. They said they just awoke one morning and she had passed. At first, everyone was conflicted if the parents should be convicted or not. But with this new information coming forward, now both Clay and Sheila will be put on trial for second-degree murder. If convicted, they both will serve the rest of their lives in prison. Now we just await for the trial to see if they are convicted for the horrific torture they put their daughter Lacey through. A trial date has not been set yet, but when it is, I'll be updating with another TikTok.